I want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Hi, I'm Luke Ryan for JoBlo.com and welcome to Movie Endings Explained. In this episode we're going to be looking at the 90s classic and debut feature film from acclaimed director Quentin Tarantino, Reservoir Dogs. In 1992, Tarantino made waves in the cinema world with the release of this blood-soaked tale of a heist gone wrong. There was a unique voice to the way he told this story, in the presentation of the narrative in a non-linear fashion, coupled with the sheer style that he applied to it. The dialogue was memorable, believable, and delivered by a group of very talented performers. But why are we here to talk about the film's ending? There's nothing to explain, right? Well, right up on Front Street, maybe so. As I always say with these videos, however, it's more an exploration than an explanation. So let's discuss this film's ending and the pieces that perhaps don't slot in to a clear-cut conclusion. The film focuses on a group of criminals who have been assembled to carry out a diamond heist. Each man is given a nondescript code name, the idea being that they're all strangers and have no ties to each other. The two most important players as it relates to the film's ending, and in my mind the film as a whole, are Mr. White, played by Harvey Keitel, and Mr. Orange, played by Tim Roth. The story opens up with the group making conversation in a diner, with Tarantino's Mr. Brown making a case for the meaning behind the Madonna song Like a Virgin, and Steve Buscemi's Mr. Pink explaining his rationale behind tipping.
Jesus Christ, I mean, these ladies aren't starving to death. They make minimum wage. I used to work minimum wage, and when I did, I wasn't lucky enough to have a job the society deemed tip-worthy.
You don't care they're counting on your tips to live?
You know what this is? It's the world's smallest violin playing just for the waitresses.
We then see the crew leaving the diner in slow motion as the title card appears. And cut straight into the mouth of pure chaos as Mr. Orange is bleeding out in the back of a car with Mr. White driving and attempting to comfort him. The heist went wrong. Horribly wrong. Mr. White brings Mr. Orange back to the meeting point in a warehouse owned by Joe Cabot, the mob boss who orchestrated the job. Mr. Pink arrives at the warehouse too and is frantic, certain that they were set up.
I don't think we got set up. I know we got set up. I mean, really, seriously, where did all those cops come from, huh? 1 minute they're not there, and the next minute they're there? I didn't hear any sirens.
While the majority of the film takes place inside the warehouse, we do cut back to earlier events that flesh out the characters, their relationship to Joe, and Joe's son, Nice Guy Eddie. Michael Madsen's Mr. Blonde arrives at the warehouse with a police officer that he's kidnapped. Blonde apparently had murdered a few civilians during the heist, which infuriates Mr. White, who is a crook, but never wanted lives to be taken. They try to get information from the cop, and Mr. Blonde ends up torturing him in a scene that definitely didn't stir up any controversy at all.
Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Mr. Blonde proceeds to douse the cop in gasoline and is about to send him up in flames when suddenly... Mr. Orange shoots him dead, and it's revealed that he is in fact an undercover cop. Nice Guy Eddie arrives, kills the cop, and accuses Mr. Orange of being the mole. Mr. White, sure that Mr. Orange is not a cop, defends him, and tensions reach a boiling point. Joe then turns up, and the remaining men end up in a Mexican standoff.
You lost your fucking mind.
God damn you, Joe. Don't make me do this.
Larry, stop pointing that fucking gun at my dad!
The resulting gunshots and who shot who has been dissected and discussed for decades, but I'll leave that particular analysis up to you.
Back and to the left. Back and to the left. Back and to the left.
Mr. Pink, who was hiding, quickly leaves with the diamonds. One of the elements of this ending that was discussed a lot over the years was the fate of Mr. Pink, as he is seemingly the only one who gets out alive. Listen carefully during this final scene of the film and you can hear in the background Mr. Pink get into his car and after a few false starts manages to drive off before the sirens ring out, the police arrive and arrest him. So Mr. Pink does survive, but would no doubt go to jail for his crimes. As for Mr. White and Mr. Orange, they're both left together in this final moment.
I'm sorry. Looks like we're gonna do a little time.
I'm a cop. Mary. I'm so sorry. I'm a cop.
After vehemently defending Mr. Orange being a mole, an undercover cop who had set them all up, Mr. White is heartbroken to learn that he placed all of his trust in a traitor. The relationship that forms between the two of them is certainly the most interesting and ultimately explosive of the entire film. They bond very firmly after the heist goes wrong, and even though they're complete strangers, Mr. White feels so badly for this kid who is dying right in front of him. Their charged conversations as Orange is in a blind panic, feeling like he was going to die, gave Mr. White every ounce of trust he felt like he needed to believe that Orange was not the traitor.
Joe, I don't know what you think you know, but you're wrong.
Like hell I am.
Joe, trust me on this. You've made a mistake. We're all real emotional, but you're barking up the wrong tree. I know this man. He wouldn't do that.
You don't know jack shit. I do.
At the end, when he learns the truth, White says nothing. He wails and places his gun on Orange's face, but he doesn't pull the trigger straight away, filled with anguish and regret. The police burst in through the door and order him to put his gun down. We zoom in close so that we don't see Orange or the gun, and gunfire rings out, sending White out of frame. So what happened? Did he kill Orange and then get shot by the police? Or could he not bring himself to do it and got shot anyway? The bigger question, I think, is why Orange would even tell Mr. White this. He surely would know that this information would break Mr. White and no doubt lead to him shooting Orange out of anger. I think the most likely answer is that Orange truly did grow to respect Mr. White as a man. At this point, Mr. Orange has been shot multiple times and has been bleeding out for a fair amount of time. Maybe he just thought too much of Mr. White to continue lying to him at the very end of his life. The only solace he could take in how badly he had ended up, dying in this criminal's arms, was to be honest and apologize to White for having placed his trust in the wrong person. As for the final beat, did White shoot Orange, or did he hold back, unable to actually do it? Now there is one gunshot in which White's body slightly moves, but he shows no pain. Then there's a second in which he moves out of shot. I think it's pretty safe to say that he shot Mr. Orange and was then gunned down by the police. You hear the police pleading with him to put the gun down, which also indicates they weren't going to open fire unless he made a move. Pulling the trigger and shooting Mr. Orange would have been that move. It ended for Mr. White and Mr. Orange in the same way it ended for the majority of the crew by the close of the story, with them both dead and riddled with bullets. All victim of one bad day, destroying everything. Reservoir Dogs is a grisly tale of pride, respect, friendship, trust, and ultimately, tragedy.